All right, Zach. So today we wanted to have a conversation about like the split market that's kind of what's happening, not just nationally, but especially here in Utah. And I wanted to have a conversation with you about that. So tell me what that means.
Perfect. So anytime we get good data, like national data, I love to dig into it and like understand it, right? Because there's national data and then we have to see how does it like compare and fit into like Utah's data. And so I'm really excited to talk about this. Right now we're going to talk about what problems and issues are first time entry level buyers having, and then what are the other set that our luxury or higher end buyers are having. Right now, we're seeing a lot of higher end buyers coming to the market, and they're taking up a large percent of the purchases that are actually occurring. And so, yeah, we'll have a fun time kind of diving into the data and just seeing, what are the differences and how do each buyer like navigate the situation, right?
Right. Yeah, and it's really interesting because we really do have like for one group the market's completely different than for another group. So I just find it fascinating that I mean start over here and if you're a move up buyer, there's a lot of my move up buyers that they've built up so much equity that they can just instantly they don't even have to sell their current home. They can go into their next home, secure that, and then they can turn around and then sell their home. Like there's so many people that have been waiting, and the people that are in this position that are in a higher end, they tend to have more equity, they tend to have more security. So after waiting for several years, they're just like, you know what, I'm done waiting. I already knew I wanted to downsize. I'm ready to downsize. I have a listing appointment on Saturday. We talked 3 years ago. They wanted to downsize. They didn't like what the market looked like. So it's funny. They called me yesterday and they said, "We're done waiting. We're just going to do it. Like we can do it. So we're just going to do it." So we'll sell their house after we figure out where they want to go because that was their main concern. They didn't want to have to sell this house and then wait and then go somewhere else and then not be sure that they could secure the house that they really, really wanted. So there's that going on a wealthier scale. Like, I mean, their current home is worth right around 1 million. I suspect that the home that they're going to buy is going to probably be right around that same price point. They might even go a little higher depending on what kind of luxuries they want, even though they might go a little bit smaller. But it doesn't matter at this point. They just want what they wanted 3 years ago and they still want it. So they're done waiting. So you've got a lot of that going on. But then if you turn around and you look at the entry level market with the squeeze on prices going up at such a rapid rate and then interest rates remaining higher, you still have 25% of the market that's just waiting for the picture perfect time. You have a lot of buyers who, again, 3 or 4 years ago wanted to jump in the market and then they just couldn't make it work. They still want to buy, they're still buyers, but they're kind of waiting for that perfect scenario. And there's a crunch. There's this thing that's happening where because the rates are a little bit higher, they actually are first time buyers, or if you're buying anything about below 500,000, I would say here in
Mhm.
Utah. So, and depending on city, I mean, some cities are more expensive than other. Bountiful or Lehigh is going to be more expensive than maybe Saratoga Springs, or if you were going to like Layton, you have options there. But the thing about that is that those buyers that are smart enough to jump in now, even though the rates are a little bit higher than they wanted them to be, I feel like it's like the cherry pick of the time. Like get in now because prices are going to go up, rates are going to come down, and we've been stabilized in our pricing. We haven't declined in value. We just haven't done a big increase. And everyone's kind of waiting. There's this false idea that the media is piping out and that a lot of potential buyers are hearing that the prices are going to come down. There's going to be another crash. And there's no evidence to sustain that. So it's really interesting as you have this struggling market at the beginning, like to get in, which is weird because the buyers are having a hard time, which actually means the sellers, their listings are sitting a little bit longer. And so we actually have a little bit more negotiator room with our buyers, which is awesome. But then in the luxury market, you can list a home. I just listed a home yesterday and we already have 3 showings lined up and it's right under 1 million. We're listed at 985 and we will probably be under contract by the end of the weekend. Like there's just more pressure. There's more multiple offers going on there than in the first time buyer type price range.
Right. Well, the great thing is too is we've seen rates come down like year over year. If we go look at where we were last year this time versus this year, there's been improvement. We also had Kevin Warsh, who just got appointed as the new Fed chairman just this past week. They did a vote on it yesterday, and he got confirmed, and so we're all excited about that. And then as far as just looking at like the statistics, about 33% of first-time home buyers made up the whole market for April. And so that means there's another, 67% that's making up that second, third, buy. And it's kind of that Gen X and Boomer that's making up that other portion, I would say. And so it's really good. It helps me to kind of just say, okay, as far as what we're seeing, we might have more concessions that we can get from that entry level, right? We're almost seeing more closing costs getting covered in that portion than we are in the, 700K plus range in of purchase price. And so puts us in a good spot to always negotiate and give the best advice for our buyers.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. And if you switch over and we talk about age and we talk
Hmm.
about where the majority of like what age range, it makes sense because like a move up buyer, that's typically going to fall within that age range that they're talking about in there. Your Gen Xers, your younger boomers, and that is where you have over half of the market. That's where you've got the most power and the most movement. So it makes sense that that's where a luxury price point, that over $1 million price point, or that's where you're seeing that competition is because that's where they have the flexibility and ability to make a move without being so dependent upon the rate and an increase in price because the majority of them are already working with some equity from a home that they have. And, fair point. Like I have a client, we just sold his house in Draper for 2.2 million, but he didn't start with a $2.2 million house. Like he started in his 20s, worked his butt off, and he and his new bride got into a little condo, scraped and scrammed and sacrificed. And then they went to a townhome, then they went to a little bit bigger single family. And eventually they ended up with a very large, beautiful home that now they're able to take that and then mostly buy their retirement home cash. So it puts them in such, and it's crazy because like someone the other day just said to me, like, I don't get it. I look down the street and I know that they don't make that much money. I look at them and I'm like, I know they don't make that much money. But the thing is like their house payment's like what? $1,800 a month because how long ago that they bought it and the equity that they have in it. So there is this frustration of those who got in before and those who are trying to get in now. But the younger you can get in, the sooner you can get in, you'll be in that position years down the road, right? Fast forward into
Yep.
that.
Well,
So,
that's the part that excites me, right? When I look at this chart, I look at the Gen Zers, right, that are 18 to 26. There's 4% of them that make up the market right now. And I'm like, okay, it's not a very big percentage, but if we look at this over the next 30, 40, 50 years, like that 4% that's getting in right now, they're going to be so grateful they did that. And they'll look back and say, oh, because I made that initial move when I did, yeah, it was tough. Yeah, it took some sacrifice. But like overall, look at the dividends it paid out.
yeah, yeah, it's a big deal. The sooner the better, right?
Right. Now, when we look at just first-time home buyers, this sections it off by age. So we see 60% of it's made up by 27 to 35-year-olds, and then all the way up until it's 80 and 100-year-olds. Now, this is the interesting thing too. When we talk about it, Utah I know is going to be a younger age than the national average, just from the numbers that we all see. But also, there's been this average going around that says, hey, it's, the average age of a first time home buyer is 40 years old. Like, well, that kind of makes sense because you've got nobody's purchasing a house when they're 17 or 16. Like, you've got to be 18 to be able to purchase, right? In order to execute a contract and everything. And then you have people that are purchasing when they're 71 all the way up to 100 that are still making up 7% of that. And so they're helping to drag that average up even higher into that, 40 range. If we looked at Utah and we kind of took out some of the outliers, I think the average first time home buyer is probably around that 25 to 26 range. And that's kind of when they're graduating, they're, getting into those next steps of life. And so it's good.
Yeah, that is good. The sooner the better, right?
Right. And then if
Well,
we
and
look at incomes, right, this is kind of a fascinating thing too. So the bulk buyers and this isn't individual income, this is household. So they're looking at everybody in the house, how much income is coming in through it. And so the typical households that are purchasing are making 100,000 or more, and their ages 27 up to 70. And that's kind of that bulk. Now, it doesn't mean that if you make 75,000 as a household, you can't purchase. Because, I mean, Janet, you and I help people all the time that are making significantly less than that. People can make 50,000, and as long as there's not a lot of debt, they could probably get into a condo. But a lot of it's just kind of strategically looking at, okay, what are the assets? What is the income? What are the options? So,
Yeah, for sure. And, luckily, I feel like here in Utah, I've been privileged to have a lot of these young kids who are getting either inheritance from mom and dad or inheritance from grandparents. Right now, I'm helping a client. We're looking in Davis County, we're trying to find something in Bountiful or even in Layton, kind of in those different areas where they can get in, and grandpa's taking care of the majority of it so that they can afford the house payment. They have three little boys and grandpa said, I'm not getting any younger. There's no use me hanging on to my money. You need the money now. So that, I mean, there's a lot of that generational wealth that is being passed down that is helping these first time buyers. So that's an amazing opportunity. And yeah, it's a great opportunity.
what
And
is such a better way to pass down the inheritance, right? Because then grandpa gets to be there to see what they get and kind of gets to experience it with them as a whole. Nice thing is too, I mean, depending on tax implications, usually there aren't tax implications on passing that money down. Granted, you'd want to consult your CPA, but a lot of times when we do gifting and different things like that, there might need to be a single IRS form filled out, but there's no taxable event essentially.
yeah, yeah, which is great. It's a great opportunity. And then switching back again to the higher end homes and why it can stay stronger. And again, it's that equity that is in the homes, which doesn't cause the strain on the actual interest rate. It's not as important what the interest rate is when you have a lot of equity. So it makes it a lot easier for people to make a move when they're not so restricted on income, like qualifications, because that equity helps them so much, that liquid cash that gets them there. And typically there's a little bit higher income involved as well with borrows and a little bit higher luxury market. And so that helps. So it makes it really nice to help them get into the higher price neighborhoods where they want to be.
And then I guess when we look at the opposite, right, the entry level, we've got smaller down payments, which, causes that monthly payment to sometimes be higher because you might have a little bit more mortgage insurance than if you're putting 20% down. Another thing we're seeing too is student loans. A lot of these graduates, that I mean, the student loan payments are there, right, as we see them. And so depending on what kind of a program they're with specifically on those student loans, those can sometimes, be a big piece of why they're feeling squeezed as well. Another study I was reading about too is the average car payment has definitely started to tick up. It's somewhere in the ballpark of 7 to 750, depending on which, when you're listening to, but it's a decent car payment, right? If you're at $700 a month, that's definitely going to factor into whether you're feeling squeezed on different parts and pieces of it. So
Well, of
it's
course.
good.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and just like, how does this apply to across the board? I mean, just helping like buyers understand, like, don't judge the whole market from national headlines, because every state is individual and trends do pass in from state to state. Like, it is good to kind of have an idea of what's happening in California because we tend to follow California. And I can tell you that right now, California is having a lot of multiple offers. My friend's mom is buying a house. She was full cash and she couldn't secure a house. It took her three tries, and she was going cash over her cash offer to, cash over ask to secure a house. So that is coming. I do believe that Utah will feel that in the near future because we do tend to follow markets. But again, like, sometimes the national headlines don't apply 100% to our individual buyers, and especially when we're talking about price range, because the national headline might be in regards to a higher price range or a lower price range, and we get confused, right? So it's
Right.
always nice to have a professional that you can rely on to get proper information about your specific scenario. And then with sellers, like you do have to price by your specific segment or your like what actually is happening in your area. And that's where it takes a professional to come in and say, hey, in your neighborhood, this is about how many days on market it's taking. Like if you're listing and then, it's an average of 30 days and there's an average negotiation of only 1%, like you have a really good feel for how to prepare for that. And then also making sure the demand, which is really high right now across the board, I can say 100% with confidence, is turnkey. Right now, buyers, regardless of what price range they're in, people really are leaning towards a home where they just don't have to do anything. They can walk in and they don't have to do a lot of work. That is what's on the highest and hottest demand list for sure. So, and then as far as agents go, like it's really important that we stay educated. I just came from a class where I was learning about AI of all things. And it was just talking about like the importance of AI for me as an agent is being able to understand and use the tool in benefit for the client. Because if I am educated and if I understand how to take that new tool and help my buyers and my sellers come out with a better income, then that is why they would be willing to hire me, is knowing that they can trust me to be able to take all those tools that are the most innovative that are going to get them where they want to go. So that's just kind of how it we can see how it's going to help everyone across the board.
I love it. Well, then three ways we see buyers competing too. Really, we're seeing a lot of arms in the higher end price range. Arms are just killing it right now, where people can get a 5, 6 arm or something like that, and they're like, okay, this rate can sometimes be a 0.5% better. Okay, I'll take that risk for the next 5 years and just know, okay, we got to do something with this eventually, but short term, it's a help. We're also seeing a lot of buy downs where sometimes people are buying these down on a temporary buy down into the 3% range. And so depending on how much money we're getting from the seller, different things like that, it can really give us a nice like cushion of like, okay, we know we're going to refinance in the next little while, but hey, let's give it a year or two of like buffer that we don't have to necessarily do anything if we don't want to. And so another thing we're seeing a lot of too is people house hacking, buying the place with the ADU, renting that out, subsidizing what their monthly mortgage payment is through there. And so there's so many ways for us to be creative. The biggest thing is just, getting into the specific market that the buyer wants to go to and figuring out what's going to be that perfect solution for them.
Yeah. And so our invitation today is before you just assume what the media is telling you is 100% accurate for you, why not get very specific, localized Utah information, whether it's Lehigh or Draper or Sandy? I mean, whatever city, Bountiful, Farmington, we're all over the place working to help clients understand locally what their scenario is. And Zach, you're such a whiz at numbers. I'm so grateful for the opportunity I have to like just pass people over to you and you can work them through and help them understand like if you have this down payment, then this rate and this is what your payment's going to look like. Because so many times they'll get out there, they get in the market or they send me a house and they're just so excited. We love this house. We want this house. But if you don't start with step one, getting fully pre-approved, then the payment for that house might be completely out of your comfort zone. Regardless of whether you can afford it or not, do you really want to spend all of your money on your house payment? So that's why it's so nice to have the Asbel team and to work hand in hand with you so that we can guide our clients into where they want to be. So thanks again for the opportunity to discuss what's happening real time in the market. I appreciate you guys so much.
Love it. Thanks, Janet.